In 1991, a researcher at Iowa State University filed a patent for a weed killer that costs about $2 and sits on grocery store shelves right now. His name was Dr. Nick Christians. He proved a common food processing powder stops weed seeds from ever sprouting. No synthetic chemicals, no spraying. So why have you never heard of it? Because the companies selling you $40 pre-emergents had no reason to point you toward their cheapest competitor. I've used this on lawns across North Texas for years, and it works. Stay with me, because there's one timing signal, not a calendar date, that decides whether this powder works or does absolutely nothing. Get that wrong and you've wasted your money. Let me tell you who actually buried this, because it wasn't a backroom meeting and it wasn't a shredded file. It was simpler than that, and it's still happening every spring on the lawn care aisle of your local big box store. Dr. Nick Christians was a turf researcher at Iowa State University. Back in the late 1980s, he wasn't even hunting for a weed killer. He was doing turf disease pathology work, studying fungus on grass plots. He'd been dusting some of those plots with corn meal as part of that disease research. And he noticed something he wasn't looking for. The plots that got the cornmeal had almost no weed seedlings coming up. None. The seeds just weren't establishing. That's how the best discoveries happen. By accident, by a man paying attention. So he ran it down, he tested it, he proved it, and in 1991 he filed a patent for corn gluten meal as a natural pre-emergent herbicide. A real patent. A real Iowa State researcher. Documented, public, sitting in the record right now. So why have you been paying $40 a bag for a synthetic pre-emergent every single spring instead? Here's the thing, nobody had to suppress this with lies. The economics did it for them. The companies selling you those $40 proteamine-based pre-emergents had no reason on earth to point you toward a feed-grade powder that costs a few dollars and does the same job. Why would they? You don't advertise your cheapest competitor. So the knowledge didn't get buried, it just never got marketed. And season after season, homeowners kept writing the $40 check for a result a university researcher already proved you could get for pocket change. So let's walk through it together, because once you see how simple this is, you're going to be a little annoyed nobody told you. The powder is corn gluten meal. That's it. Corn gluten meal. It's not some exotic compound. It's a byproduct of wet milling, the industrial process that turns field corn into corn syrup and corn starch. When they separate all that out, what's left is corn gluten meal, a golden gritty powder. For decades it's been sold as livestock feed because it runs about 60% protein, and that protein makes it a fine feed for cattle and chickens and fish. That's where you find it. Not on the shiny lawn care end cap. You walk into a feed store or an agricultural supplier and you ask for a 50-pound bag of corn gluten meal. They'll hand you a sack of cattle feed for a few dollars and never blink. The same active ingredient an Iowa State scientist patented as a weed killer, sitting in the feed aisle, labeled as something to feed your livestock. And that's exactly why you've never seen it on a commercial. There's no glossy bag, no brand name, no marketing budget behind a sack of feed-grade corn protein. The cheapest tool in the shed is the one nobody's paid to show you. Now here's where it gets interesting. Here's the mechanism, the part that explains why the synthetic industry's whole story never even fit this stuff. Corn gluten meal contains a group of compounds called dipeptides. Don't let the word scare you. What those dipeptides do is simple and brutal. When a weed seed germinates, the very first thing it tries to do is push out a feeder root, a little anchor root that pulls in water. The dipeptides in corn gluten shut that down. The seed sprouts a shoot, it puts up its little green flag, but it cannot form that root, so you've got a seedling with no anchor. The first dry spell hits, and with no root to pull water, it shrivels up and dies. It desiccates. It's done before it ever became a weed you'd recognize. Now stay with me, because this is the key. That means corn gluten meal is a pre-emergent. It stops seeds from establishing. It does absolutely nothing to a weed that's already up and growing. You cannot spray it on a dandelion and watch it die. It's not that kind of tool. And right there is why the industry's framing never worked for it. The whole synthetic weed killer business is built on spray and kill. See the weed, hit the weed, watch it brown out. That sells. It's visible. Corn gluten doesn't give you that drama. It prevents a problem you never see, which is a much harder thing to sell in a bottle, even though prevention is the only thing that actually wins. All right, let's talk numbers, because this is where it gets real. The full label rate is about 20 pounds per 1,000 square feet. That's heavy. That's the rate that works, and I'll tell you in a minute why getting that rate right matters as much as anything. At that rate, the first year you're looking at roughly 60% weed control. Now I want to be straight with you. 60% is not the 98% a perfectly timed synthetic will give you on paper. But here's the part nobody tells you. The effect is cumulative. Year 2, you're climbing. By year 3, applied right, you're up over 80% control. It gets better every single season. Think about what that means. A synthetic pre-emergent gives you the same result every year, forever, as long as you keep buying it. Corn gluten builds. The longer you use it, the less weed pressure you have, because you're draining the seed bank a little more each season. And it does a second job at the same time. Remember that 60% protein? Protein is nitrogen. Corn gluten meal runs about 10% nitrogen by weight. So while it's stopping seeds from rooting, it's feeding your established grass. It greens up the lawn. You're fertilizing and preventing weeds in one pass. I tested this myself. Back around 2015, I read up on Dr. Christian's research, and I put corn gluten on a customer's lawn. Full rate, 20 pounds 1,000, 3 seasons running. And what I found matched the science exactly. It worked. Not overnight, but cumulatively, season over season. The weed pressure dropped and the turf got thicker and greener. But, and this matters, it only worked when I hit the full rate and nailed the timing. Skimp on either one and you get nothing. That's the kind of result that doesn't fit on a $40 bag, because it makes the $40 bag unnecessary. And here's the part that even folks who've heard of corn gluten usually miss. Most lawn products are designed to keep you coming back. That's the business model. A synthetic pre-emergent does the exact same thing every year. Same cost, same result, no progress. You're renting weed control. You stop paying, the weeds come right back to where they started. It's a dependency cycle, and it's a profitable one. Corn gluten runs the opposite direction. It gets cheaper and more effective the longer you use it. Year 3 costs you the same few dollars as year 1, but you're getting 80% control instead of 60, and your lawn is thicker and better fed on top of it. The problem shrinks while the price stays flat. Now think like a company for a second. Would you ever build your marketing around a product that makes itself less necessary every year? That feeds the lawn so it crowds out weeds on its own? Of course not. You'd build it around the bottle you have to rebuy forever. So this was never going to be the product on the end cap display. Not because anybody lied about it, because a tool that solves your problem permanently and gets cheaper over time is the exact opposite of a good product to sell. A thick lawn is a fortress, and corn gluten helps you build one that holds. That's precisely the kind of thing that doesn't survive a marketing meeting. Now, before we keep going, I want to tell you about something. If what I'm showing you today is clicking, and you're starting to realize that everything you were told about weeds was backwards, that the whole game is stopping seeds before they ever root, then you're ready for the part most people never learn. Corn gluten works because it hits the weed at the seed stage. Understanding that seed bank, that life cycle, is the whole battle. That's exactly what I lay out in Chapter 2, the weed cycle. Understanding your enemy, in my book, Larry's 30-Day Weed Kill Protocol. It's $17, and it's for folks who are exhausted by the weekly pulling cycle and want a permanent fix, not another one-off tip. You'll find it at larrysgardenbooks.com. If you're watching on your TV right now, grab your phone and point it at the QR code on screen. Take your time finding it. I'll be right here. So let's come back to the real question. Why did this stay buried? Follow the money because it's all there. A synthetic proteamine pre-emergent sells for around $40 a bag, and the margin on it is enormous. Why? Because the actual active ingredient is just a few ounces of patented chemistry. You're paying for a tiny amount of a molecule somebody owns, blended into filler. That's a beautiful business. Small, light, high markup, easy to ship, easy to stack on a shelf. Now look at corn gluten. You need about 20 pounds per 1,000 square feet. 20 pounds. It's bulky, it's heavy, it's a sack of feed. The margin is pennies. And the mechanism? Once Dr. Christian's patent eventually lapsed, there was nothing proprietary left to defend. No molecule to own. Anybody could bag it, which means nobody could corner it. You can't build a $40 brand on a commodity feed product your competitor can sell for the same few dollars. It also couldn't be standardized into a tidy retail product the way a synthetic can. A chemical performs the same every time. Corn gluten depends on rate and timing and weather. And I'll be honest with you, because this audience is too smart for me not to be. That's a real limitation. Corn gluten genuinely is less reliable than a synthetic if you time it wrong. The industry didn't have to invent a reason to ignore it. That gave them a convenient one. But here's what it cost you. Every spring you walked past the cheaper soil-building option and wrote the $40 check, because nobody with a marketing budget had any reason to tell you it was sitting in the feed aisle. Now here's the timing signal I promised you. The one thing that decides whether this powder works or does absolutely nothing. It is not a calendar date. Forget the calendar. The signal is forsythia bloom. When that forsythia bush lights up yellow in your area, that's nature telling you the soil temperature at the surface has hit about 55 degrees. And 55 is the exact point crabgrass starts to germinate. So your corn gluten has to go down 1 to 2 weeks before that, while the soil is still cool, so the barrier is already in place when those seeds wake up. Here's the trap. Put it down too late, after the seeds have germinated. And that 10% nitrogen I told you about? It feeds the very weeds you were trying to stop. Same powder, opposite result. You also need to water it in briefly to activate it, then you want a 3 to 5 day dry window. If it rains steady right after germination, the seedlings root anyway and recover. So don't trust the calendar. Drop a cheap soil thermometer in and wait for 55 degrees. In my 3-season test, same rate, same powder. Timing was the whole difference between a thick lawn and a wasted bag. Before I let you go, now you've got the knowledge the industry never bothered to market. Corn gluten, the full rate, and the timing signal that makes it work. If you want the complete year-round system that surrounds it, that's Chapter 9, the No Weed Garden Year-Round, in Larry's 30-Day Weed Kill Protocol. It lays out the whole seasonal calendar: spring refresh, summer monitoring, fall prep, that keeps weeds out without spraying a thing. It's the permanent fix for folks who are done with the weekend pulling cycle, not another one-off tip. Head to larrysgardenbooks.com. If you're on your TV, grab your phone and aim it at that QR code. No rush, take your time pulling it up. All right, here's the takeaway. Corn gluten meal, about 20 pounds per 1,000 square feet, put down before the forsythia blooms. Cuts your weeds season after season without a single drop of synthetic chemical, and feeds your grass while it does it. Now you know what that $40 bag never told you. And if you think that one's buried, wait till you hear the truth about vinegar as a weed killer. What it really does, what it doesn't, and why the contact kill story is only half right. That's coming. Go check your lawn. You'll see what I mean. I'll see you in the next one.